This is A Line Around Your Thoughts, a podcast that centers on conversations with artists, writers, musicians, and creatives from around the Inland Northwest. I'm your host, E.J. Iannelli, and joining me today in the Roquehart Media Studio is the writer Susie Leonard Weller, who has recently published a book that is part memoir, part travel diary, and also kind of a little bit of a discussion starter as well. And it is titled 52 Global Reflections, a Pilgrim's Travel Memoir. So welcome, Susie.
It's delightful for me to be here.
I am super psyched to have you. I have been reading your memoir, diary, and conversation starter with interest. And I was trying to find the best point to begin. And I think we kind of have to begin where the memoir begins. And that goes all the way back to the beginning with your birth and your early family life in the Bay Area. So can you kind of evoke, I know that this is teased out in the book, but can you evoke kind of the context and the milieu that we have going on in 1954?
Sure. I was born in the San Francisco Bay Area next to Berkeley. My mom was a community college instructor, and also for Berkeley, she ran the Berkeley preschool. And because we lived in a middle-class neighborhood in El Cerrito, a suburb of that area, when I was 12, actually when I was 10, she gave me a 3-piece set of vinyl blue luggage. And the not-so-subtle message was, you're going to be leaving home soon and needing this. And literally 2 years later, myself and my younger brother, who was 10, we were on a plane going from San Francisco, crossing through Los Angeles, LAX, by ourselves, having to cross to international flight to Mexico City to live with a family we had never met who had 2 children about our age. And none of the kids spoke English except for the dad, and he worked for the District of Federal for Mexico City. So we were in the deep dive pool of cultural immersion because she wanted us to appreciate that the privileges we enjoyed were not universal.
Mm-hmm. And was it common at the time for younger children, so 10 and 12, to head off and travel independently? Or was it, did they tend to be accompanied by adults? Because I know that when I was probably about the same age, my parents put me on a plane in Newark, New Jersey, and sent me down to Florida to see my grandparents. And, that was a big event. And I don't know that it was that common for children at the time to travel independently. So was it common at the time for children to...
They thought my mom was crazy. and she was a prayerful woman, so I was sending angels with us. But it was pretty scary for me as being the elder, sibling, to be managing going through. I have a hard time going through LAX now, let alone as a 12-year-old and getting on an international flight. And that was before the time that they had, flight attendants that would help shepherd you along the way. Mm-hmm. And to go to a foreign culture, that's like, at least you went to, Florida, same language for the most part. And this was truly like an immersion. I remember, walking around their neighborhood, and they were middle class. They had a maid's quarters and a maid who lived upstairs to serve their family. And yet when we were going to school with them, I would see beggars on the street. I would see donkeys with hay piled, on the cart, along with motor scooters and regular cars, and thought, whoa, I'm not in Kansas anymore. This is truly a different experience. But she had worked with their uncle, who is a priest at the local parish, and that's how we got this set up into, as a private kind of cultural exchange.
But even though it was challenging, it was one of those scenarios that's very character building, because it did indeed kind of set you on this pilgrim's course that you would follow for the rest of your life, where you had no issue living involved in these peregrinations around the world.
Yes. One definition of a pilgrim is someone who's willing to get out of their comfort zone. Mm. And it is both, in my opinion, a spiritual experience as well as a travel experience to explore different cultures around the world. And after my amazing week for me was turning 18 in June 1972. I turned 18, voted for the first time, canceled my dad's vote. He was not happy about that. Graduated from high school and left to work on a kibbutz in Israel. And I was part of a Jewish community center in Oakland's experience, where I flew to New York by myself and met the Jewish group flying over NLL Airlines to Tel Aviv. And I was the only Christian in the group. All the rest were Jews wanting to appreciate their culture and their homeland, and many of them had relatives there. But I was a Christian, and I wanted to explore that Jesus was Jewish, and I wanted to explore the homeland. So I worked on a kibbutz for 6 weeks and literally, sorted dirt clods from potatoes, inoculated baby chicks, worked in the, their kitchen and did a variety of things. I was in the cotton fields, hoeing weeds. And I was used to working as opposed to some of the people from New York City weren't used to working in fields. And so the guy who was the overseer asked me, well, does your dad own a kibbutz in California? Because you know how to work. But one of the things that struck me was because it was an organized group, they assigned a host family for each of the volunteers. And the Avanom family were such an amazing host. And so I would, after my work shift, I would go to their little, even though it was a kibbutz, it was an established one. They had areas for private housing to be able to have some meals on their own as well as collective meals. So I was introduced for the first time to Nescafe coffee, which I was not a coffee drinker.
Very cosmopolitan. Yeah.
But she put enough ice cream in it that it was palatable for me. But I was reading the book by Leon Uris about the Exodus. Mm-hmm. And I just come to the part where they're describing about tattooing the numbers on the Jewish inmates and others in the concentration camps. And they had a friend visiting them. And I couldn't help but just stare at his forearm. And I saw the tattooed numbers. Mm-hmm. And it was struck me as an 18-year-old, this is not just something in a book. This is real. And just the amount of wars that they have experienced and have a bomb shelter there, there's a lot of, I think, trauma experience of the survivors. And with the group, we traveled for 2 weeks from the Golan Heights, almost now would be Lebanon, down to the Sea of Eilat and, places along the way. But the part that was most interesting for me is that before we left, I hadn't really spent any time visiting the Christian sites because I was with the Jewish community group. Mm. And so I spent a week on the Jewish side of Jerusalem, and then I spent a week inside the Arab market with a Palestinian family. The woman took in boarders for some money, and she worked for the Ecce Homo Catholic convent. And so it was interesting seeing things from a Palestinian perspective. And then I had one more week before the group was going to meet to go back to the United States. And I prayed for guidance, and I didn't know where I was going to be. And I met a woman, her name was Ma Kimmery, and she ran a Bible store. And she says, well, where are you living? I says, well, I'm in transition. I've got a week. And she says, well, why don't you come and live with me for a week? And she lived on the Arab side of Jerusalem. So there I was, 18 years old, taking, the Arab buses, to the Arab part of town. And I have to say, the women were so gracious to me that they would stand up so that I, on this crowded bus, would have a place to sit down as it's careening through all these alleyways. And I met, some other people, an Arab pastor and a young guy, about my age. And so it was really fun. That was one of my highlights for me, just seeing the whole range. But also appreciating the Israelis have made the desert bloom. And really done incredible technology within Israel. But it's been at a high price. And as I was meeting Palestinians, this is again 1972, they were definitely treated as second-class citizens, and this is before the wall and other things had been built. So it was painful to be able to, again, part of traveling is seeing things firsthand from different perspectives, not just one perspective.
Right. And I was going to say that highlights one of the key aspects of true travel is these, minor epiphanies or maybe large scale epiphanies where they alert us to different perspectives, to different living conditions, living situations, and it really does kind of expand our worldview. And you begin to realize, wherever you happen to live, that how finite that experience is and how there is this multiplicity of perspective throughout the world. And so you said you were 18 when you were experiencing this. And so was that something that made you hungry for additional travel to see more perspectives and to see more both suffering and beauty?
Yes. My friends describe me the female version of Rick Steves, and I love his books and his writing. And when he came to Spokane, about 6 months ago to speak, I had a chance to meet him. And he talked about really the two wings of travel, that travel is both a political act and a spiritual act. And so he talked about his experience with the Sufis, and this reminds me of the Sufis in terms of the two wings, that in fact it transforms us if we allow it. This is not just simply, if this is Tuesday, this must be Belgium. You're running through as many cities and countries and sites as you possibly can, but really spending time with local people and getting off the tourist track and getting to know them. And that has really changed my perspective. So in terms of traveling, that after I graduated from college, I spent 2 years in Minnesota with a volunteer program. And while I was there, my mother died. And so I was 22, and I was going to do another volunteer program in Seattle. But I had this summer in between because I was teaching high school religion. And I decided that I really, after her death, I needed some distance and I needed some perspective taking. And traveling's always been a solace for me. So in those days,
Can I just ask you, the circumstances surrounding her death were quite singular, in my opinion.
Yes.
And so I don't know if you wanted to tease some of that out, because I found it quite important, because it highlighted some of the dangers that you actually address in this book of religious addiction.
Yes.
So I don't know if you want to provide some of the circumstances around her
Sure.
passing. And she was just 49, wasn't she?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, she was 49. She was still teaching life's marriage and family and child development at the community colleges in Contra Costa County in Richmond, California. But she had gotten into the Catholic charismatic movement, as I had as well. And in my opinion, any good thing can be misused and abused. And that goes with spirituality, that there's many healthy forms of spirituality, but there's also unhealthy forms. And as she became to do what I would consider a more solo spiritual journey, just her and Jesus, and less of what I would call a discerning group of a community who would give her feedback about her choices and her actions, she was reading the lives of the saints, and a lot of them did a lot of prayer and fasting. And so she did eat, but it was very little. And more and more, she started, to look very gaunt, very thin, and she wore more and more long clothes to cover up how thin and gaunt she was. And that actually became the cause of her death, it was the side effects of extreme fasting. And this had been going on since I left home at 18. I saw her the last time she was alive. I was 19, and it was like I could tell that her religious abuse and misuse was getting more and more severe, and she almost died my freshman year of college. And my dad took her to the hospital and put her on IV, and she, as soon as she got a little weight, a little nutrition, she pulled out the IVs and said, let me live my life. And I remember having this conversation with my dad. I'm all of 18. Maybe I just turned 19. And it was like, do we commit her to a mental hospital, or do we allow her to make her choices and she could die? And I remember thinking, you know what? At this point, she's not hurting anyone. She's only hurting herself. She's still able to teach. And so she has the right to make the choices she's making. But it was very painful. And basically, I would continue to write to her, but she never wrote me back except for sending Bible tracts. And then she died on Mother's Day. And so that was painful. And so I was living with Dominican sisters in Minneapolis at this convent as part of that experience. And since then, I started to research about religious abuse. And some of the books that were really helpful for me were by Father Leo Booth. And he was an alcoholic in recovery. And he started to recognize that the patterns of alcoholism are very similar to religious abuse and addiction, that you don't go from 0 to 100. It's an increment kinds of stages, but some of the patterns are similar in that it's extreme. It's that's the only focus. There's an exclusion and not able to hear other points of view. And so when I would try to talk with my mom, even use scripture verses about your body as a temple of the Holy Spirit, she would always find other things, to discount it, and was not able to take it in. And that became more and more of a problem. And so, unfortunately, I have some cousins that were in the Children of God, which is also considered a Christian cult, and she was supporting them financially. And one of the signs of abuse is this excessiveness, excessive fasting, excessive tithing, that there's extreme, there's no other people you talk to except for people that are in this very narrow group that reinforce your point of view. And so I've written several articles that have been published about recognizing the signs of religious abuse and addiction, trying to make sense of her death.
And in some ways, travel served as a way to come to terms with her passing, was a way to make sense of her passing and maybe help contextualize it within the wider world. And I noticed, and I think maybe one thing that we should address is how the book is structured, because this is more than just a travel memoir. It's you have organized it according to the compass points, or the points of the compass rose.
Yes.
So we have east, which is spring, and there are also these developmental stages. So there are these seasons.
Yes.
So we have the points of the compass, which are also associated with seasons,
Yes.
which are then also associated with developmental stages, individual developmental stages. So we have the east, which is the spring, which also is associated with youth.
Yes. Early childhood.
Right. And then we have the south, which is associated with summer and, maybe middle adulthood or early
And
adulthood.
youth and young adulthood.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And then there is the west, which is associated with autumn and maybe our autumnal years.
Yes.
And then finally, there's the north, which is associated, I think, quite naturally with the winter, and then also the later stages of adulthood. So, and in mentioning that, in the early stages, a lot of your travels were confined to the U.S. And mostly visiting family. And it seemed like a sense of kind of grounding yourself, connecting with a larger family and friend network. And so that maybe is somewhat something that drove some of these travels early on.
I would say that I got a lot of support from my grandmother, my dad's mom, as well as her daughter, my Aunt Jane. And so when my mom died, I formally asked my Aunt Jane to be my mother, and she accepted. And her daughter had died unexpectedly in a car crash, so it was a real gift. So for my 50th birthday, we had a red hat party, and so she drove up with her husband from Los Angeles to celebrate, key milestones in my life. But I also would say these cousins that were in San Luis Obispo, Avila Beach, and kind of midpoint, my uncle, was a great uncle actually, but they had like 10 kids. And so it was like, yay, being part of a larger family that was roughhousing and having fun. And we'd sleep on the beach and have campfires and do all the fun things that I missed in some of my growing up years.
For your 50th, weren't you also in Switzerland?
Yes.
Okay. We're hopping around a little bit, but since we've landed there, what did you do on your 50th birthday in Switzerland?
I think of the 50th birthday as a huge milestone. My brother died at 47 of a heart attack, my mother at 49. And so I thought, gosh, if I'm making it to 50, I'm going to celebrate it. So I did something wild. I was traveling with my husband and our 2 teenage children, and we were in Switzerland in the mountains, and we're staying at youth hostels. And we saw, as we were hiking around, we saw this opportunity for people to go paragliding off the mountain. And at first I was like, no way, I'm scared of heights. I'm not doing that. But then one of the people said, yeah, we just took a 90-year-old off the cliff. I thought, well, if a 90-year-old can do it, I can do it. So I went first, and I did have a guide who's with me. He's doing all the work. I'm just baggage in the back. But at first, after, I was like, scared to do it. Then as we were floating around the Swiss Alps, and he's explaining the glaciers, and already, this is in, 26 years ago, 25 years ago, already the glaciers were receding, so we could see the impact of the ecology. But I had this sense of feel the fear and do it anyway, and that I wanted to celebrate, really going into the second half of my life, or however long I have, with gusto.
Well, and I think there, in kind of a nutshell, is a certain thing to bear in mind with travel, is because true travel, not necessarily just getting on a bus and going from tourist destination to tourist destination, means opening yourself up and making yourself a little vulnerable. and embracing maybe a controlled risk like paragliding through the Swiss Alps. But so many of your travel experiences involve that element of vulnerability
Yes.
and leaving yourself open to experience life. Again, we've touched on beauty and suffering and experiencing both of those in whatever place you happen to be.
Yes. After my mother died, I had been saving money from my volunteer training experience. I was teaching high school religion in Minneapolis, as I mentioned. And so I took the little money I had and I took the bus to New York, and never been to New York. And at those days, you could get a Freddie Laker flight from New York City to London for $99. So I had that. I bought that and my Eurail pass, and I was going to originally go with a friend, and she backed out at the last minute. And my dad said, "Go for it." Mm-hmm. So he was encouraging me to travel by myself for 2 months, literally from Northern Ireland to Greece. And what I found is by staying in youth hostels, one, I met a lot of people my own age, and there's always typically room for one more in terms of a bed. But if you're traveling with another person, maybe not. The other thing is that when there's just one, it seemed like I was much more approachable to be able to interact with locals. And so I worked at in Northern Ireland, out north of Belfast in County Antrim, at a reconciliation peace center called in Ballycastle. And they introduced me to some of the troubles this is 1978 in Northern Ireland. And it's called Corrymeela. It's a reconciliation center. And in my book, I mentioned about the work that they have done about there is no innocent bystander. That when things happen and we don't speak up, we're part of the problem. Mm. And so it was interesting going through the checkpoints in Northern Ireland when I was in Belfast and traveling around and seeing, some of the troubles and just hearing their experiences. And then when I was in Scotland, I had a chance to go to a retreat center there, also there for a week. So it wasn't just simply, in and out for a day. It was spending time. As well as in Taizé, France. I was the only American that I knew of, and there was probably 3,000 people that were camping in this big circus. I had my sleeping bag and my little tube tent, and so I joined in with them, and people were speaking. I felt embarrassed that I only spoke English, maybe a little Spanish, for get out of trouble. But they were often multilingual. But when they said in multiple languages, "Ruiz, be quiet, silencio," all the chattering stopped. Mm-hmm. And can you imagine 3,000 young people, 18 to 35, in silence for like an hour? And just that common wave of energy of being in silence together was very powerful. And I really enjoyed being there for a week. And there's lots of Taizé services that are in the Spokane area.
Yeah. The opposite of silence might be the bagpipes that you experienced out in front of Edinburgh Castle. Yes. And you said that this was kind of a moment of transcendence, that experiencing these bagpipes being played. And again, travel kind of opens us up to those experiences. Yeah. Can you talk about that moment when you were listening to the bagpipes and you were whisked away to somewhere otherworldly or transcendental?
Thank you. Yes, the bagpiper was playing Amazing Grace. And so I just felt it reverberate throughout my body. And I learned more about the Amazing Grace was an anthem because of some of the original writer, I think, was actually part of the slave trade. Mm-hmm. And him writing the hymn was part of making amends and part of his advocacy was then abolishing the slave trade from England much earlier than some other countries. So I look at the power of music, the power of words that can transform.
And you highlight there, I think, something that you've already touched on. Yours is a very strong faith.
Yes.
But you also have a very strong belief in justice. You have an aversion to kind of recoil from inequality and injustice. And certainly your travels have informed this, but this was a theme that I recognized that ran through almost every anecdote or every sort of mini memoir that you shared or every diary entry, was that, your desire to see justice in so many different communities. So, for example, you've already talked about the Israeli-Palestine or Palestinian conflict. You've talked about the troubles in Northern Ireland. And so this was something that, at what point did this become very embedded in you, this desire for justice, this desire for rightness and harmony as well?
I think my travels really cemented it. But I went to Holy Names High School in Oakland, and they had a very strong social justice dimension in terms of being of service, but also looking at social change. And I remember in my history classes reading about Anne Frank and about the Holocaust and wondering what would I have done in those situations. And when I was traveling, I visited Anne Frank's house in Amsterdam. And then my freshman year of college, I had a chance to hear Corrie ten Boom speak, and she was the author of The Hiding Place. And just like other people, her family were watchmakers, and so they sheltered Jews as well. A neighbor turned them in, and so she and her sister went to Ravensbrück, women's concentration camp, and her sister died. But when Corrie was talking about the role of forgiveness, the guard who had been really mean to her sister was in her meeting and came up to her after she spoke about forgiveness and asked, "Would you forgive me?" And what I appreciate is that Corrie was honest and said, at first it was no way. You hurt me, you hurt my beloved sister, my daughter, my family has been killed by these Nazis. There's no way I can forgive you. And then as he extended his hand and just left it there, she said she felt like this energy move through her that said, this ends here, and I need to forgive. And so she did forgive him, and she said she felt this electric shock just go through her. But it inspired me when I also went to Dachau. I went through the concentration camps, especially since I'd been in Israel and met people who had survived. Wanted to see that for myself. And what struck me, because I was traveling by myself, is that Dachau is only about 22 kilometers from Munich. And the town is only about maybe 3 kilometers from the death camp. Well, when I travel by car from here to Seattle, I smell the rendering plants in Moses Lake. There's no way, there's a movie called Zone of Interest, there's no way that the local people didn't know what was going on in those concentration camps. And then my husband and I went on about a 2-month trip, and we were in Berlin, Germany. And it really struck me going through the artifacts there of, again, asking myself, what would I have done in that situation? And I see parallels to today. And in fact, I was on an underground Berlin tour of the S-Bahn with their underground, and it was used for shelter during World War II, but also during when the Soviets invaded. And the tour guide, the German Berlin tour guide, was showing artifacts from World War II, like the Enigma machine and other mementos. And they had Hitler's speech, and this was in 2016 before Trump's first election. They had Trump's speech, and they were making the parallels between what happened to them and then current events. And that was very sobering for me.
Yeah, and sobering indeed, because the questions that you are raising now and that you asked of yourself, and so when I classify your book as a discussion starter, every section ends with about 3 questions that are meant to encourage reflection, and they stem from the travelogue that you have provided and the memoir that you provided and some of the revelations that you had in each of these places. And you pose those to the reader, and you encourage the reader to ask themselves these very same questions. And that is the one following your visit to Amsterdam, where you visited Anne Frank's house, now a museum. You ask yourself, you pose the question that I think a lot of people should be asking themselves is, seeing these injustices, would I have stood up as well? And so I kind of like it's not necessarily a confrontational thing, but it is very reader directed, these questions that are meant to encourage reflection in the reader, so they don't necessarily have to visit those places to ask themselves those questions.
Yes, I actually wrote the book There's over 160, about 160 reflection questions, as you mentioned, 3 for each of the 52 locations I describe, and each of the chapters has a quality that's associated with that chapter. So, for example, when I visited Vienna, I also visited Viktor Frankl's home that has become a museum, and the theme for that particular chapter is meaning. And I was so inspired by his work and life that he, in particular, his wife was killed, his children was killed. They found the manuscript he was writing and burnt it in front of him. They took his wedding ring, they stripped him naked, and what he said was, "You can do all these things to me, but you cannot make me hate you." Whew. Could I have done that when I would have experienced such brutality and such suffering? So that's, what gives you meaning, what gives you hope in the midst of challenges. And so I have developed a 6-week book discussion guide, hoping that people would be part of a book group. I'm part of the former Jesuit Volunteer Corps, and we had a meeting of people in Spokane, and one of them is a local chaplain youth minister on the Gonzaga campus. And I was hoping that kind of my book would be used for those kind of discussions where people might choose one particular quality that speaks to them. It could be joy, it could be gratitude, or it could be these more serious topics, and have that be a fruit for discussion. And there's an index in the back of all the qualities and the locations that might appeal to people.
Yeah, and it drives home why we travel. It isn't just to see pretty sights.
Yes.
It isn't just for bragging rights to come home and say, yes, I visited, the outdoor opera in Vienna. It's so that we might, there's this process of self-edification and horizon expanding that also comes with travel. And it seems to me that this is what really appealed to you, whether you're traveling in the United States and taking or going to New York and then taking a $99 flight to London. Sure, there's some novelty there, and isn't it great to see the changing of the guards at Buckingham Palace?
Yes.
But there's also all these other rewards that are bound up in travel that I think the questions certainly drive home.
Thank you. That was my intent. One of the highlights was in 2023, we had a chance to visit Turkey, and we spent a month there, traveling all around. And one of the places we wanted to go see was Göbekli Tepe. And that has been discovered really in the last 40 years or so as being probably 5,000 years older than the temples or other archaeological sites.
And for folks who aren't familiar with
Yes.
that, can you describe the historical or the cultural significance of this?
Sure. Göbekli Tepe is called the Potbelly Hill. And it was a German, Klaus Schmidt, kind of discovered it in the 1960s. And what they're discovering is that these are incredible, intricate stone T pillars with, carvings of animals. And it's throwing the archaeological world upside down because, like I said, it was probably 9,600 BCE. And the temples and other ones are more like 4,000 or 5,000 BCE. So this is almost twice as old. And to have this level of detail and archaeological organization, and it's asking the question, perhaps this was a religious center that then inspired agrarian economy because people came together to be able to build this worship site. So it's asking lots of questions. Well, there was no public transportation, and so from our hotel we were able to hire a driver for the day to take us around, and his name was Nuslim, and I was disappointed because afterwards I was thinking, I really want to have information about this in English, and it was only in Turkish and other languages. And I was going to go to the Sanliurfa Museum to get it in English, and again, it was closed because of a flood. And on the last day, as he's taking us to the airport, he says, "I have a gift for you." And it was literally this size of a museum quality book, because he was a very connected person of coffee table book of Göbekli Tepe, and it had English in the back.
No
and
kidding.
It was just a gift, and he inscribed it. He was a Kurdish person, heard us talking, said, "May God bless you." And I just thought, wow, here's this Muslim guy supporting these, Christians from the United States to be global citizens, to be connected. That for me was such a gift.
And again, beauty in suffering. The Kurds have been no strangers to suffering, and the fact that, on the personal level, there are these just exquisite gestures like that
Yes.
create this human connection. There are two questions that kind of arise from that, and I'm kind of wondering which one to broach first. But I will say that the winter section, the latter section of the book, spends a lot of time in Turkey. So whereas the initial section spent a lot of time in the U.S., again, as you were kind of reconnecting with family and friends. So why do you spend so much time? Like, what is Turkey's significance to you? And I know you teased this out in some of the individual chapters, but what was Turkey's significance? Why is that so associated with winter for you?
Well, I look at winter as really integrating my life. It's the last season. It's also the season of elderhood. And we spent time particularly in Turkey, but particularly on the Bosphorus Strait. And we were in Istanbul. We rented a place on the Arab side of Turkey because we wanted to see how local neighborhoods live, and we were not just in the tourist on the European side. And that particular theme for that chapter is diversity. And that's what I appreciate about Turkey, is that the father of Turkey as a modern state, he really recognized the keeping some of the religious stuff out of it so that there would be rights and that all people would be respected and that women were partners. Sadly, that's not true with the current leadership, but it was. Ataturk is the founder of Turkey. It was there. We had a chance to visit all over, Turkey, because they're very inexpensive flights. We had a chance to. Went to the Arumi, dancing the whirling dervishes.
Yeah.
And what was powerful for me was they were said in the very beginning, this is a prayer experience, put your cameras away. At the end, you can take some photos, but this is a prayer experience. And it was that sense of one foot in and another foot out, and just allowing the movement and the spirit to move in surprising ways. And at the very end, they invited us, for some tea and talk about the principles of Sufism, which I think is a real bridge between Christianity and Islam, and it bridges all kinds of East-West kinds of traditions. And so that's what I particularly appreciate about my time in Turkey.
Yeah, bridge building is a metaphor that certainly appears. I think you even mention it in the conclusion and talk about the importance of bridge building. And is it Mostar in Bosnia Herzegovina that you mention? And I think Rick Steves even gets a specific mention in that chapter.
Gets a shout out.
Yeah, there were a few places that I wanted to touch on, and that was one of them.
Yes.
And if you could talk about the significance of that to you.
Mostar is an amazing place, and this bridge was built, it was an engineering marvel in the 1500s. And then during the Bosnia and Herzegovina War, it was targeted because it always had been a symbol where Christians, Muslims, and Jews had lived in peace together in Mostar. And during the war, all these ethnic and religious tensions kind of pulled things, frayed them apart. Gratefully, the international community, UNESCO, has rebuilt it, and so it's now a symbol of unity. And what's surprising is that they have recently, like in the last 20 years or so, put up a statue of Bruce Lee. And I'm like, really? Bruce Lee?
A great cultural unifier, right?
I know. It's like, really? And when I researched it, they said it was because no one would ask him, well, who are you? What did you do in the war? And so it became a unifying kind of thing. But it was also within driving distance of a very famous Catholic pilgrimage site in Medjugorje.
But that highlights, I think, there were moments when your faith was strengthened, and there are moments when your faith was challenged. So we've already kind of made reference to the strength of your faith. But when you share some of these anecdotes, I'm sure, for example, that experience maybe reaffirmed your faith. Was there any moment when you were kind of challenged or encouraged to doubt? Or were moments where your faith wavered because of maybe some of the suffering that you had seen?
It's very disturbing for me when I see religion being misused and used as a weapon instead of as a, like you said, as building bridges among people globally, as well as like with faith, as well as among nations. So, traveling in Northern Ireland and seeing two Christians fighting each other, Catholics and Protestants, how sad is that? I understand other diversities might be more understandable because we fear the other. And so for me, traveling is really important to build that bridge. I've included a quote within each of the reflections, and the one I'd like to quote is from Mark Twain when he said, "Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on those accounts." And that is my thought, is that travel makes a huge difference because we begin to see people as people, not as a them. And that has been the gift for me of traveling literally from Denmark to Australia and 50 United States and 5 Canadian provinces. And that is the resounding as one human family. And I had a chance when we were literally in Key West, there was this great mosaic, and it says one human family, and that's how I end the book. And in here, I also mentioned that we're living in challenging times, and that Valerie Carr, who's a Sikh author and leader of the Revolutionary Love Project, she wrote a children's book called World of Wonder. And in the book, the kid asks, "When I see someone being mean, I wonder, what's hiding underneath? Find out what makes them behave this way. Love can make us very brave." And Wonder Baby says, "Wow, whoa, you're a part of me I don't yet know." So my hope is that the travel would build bridges of compassion, and that when I'm pointing a finger at you, 3 are pointing back at me, and how could I begin to learn you're a part of me I don't know, and to make friends with people that we have considered enemies.
And is that then the primary takeaway that you hope? I mean, you pose, as you mentioned, 3 questions at the end of every chapter, but is that this sense of fellow feeling, this sense of camaraderie, this sense of unity across humankind, is that kind of the takeaway that you're hoping that folks get from this?
Yes, there's much more that unites us than divides us. And to recognize we are a nation of immigrants and refugees. When I was in Minnesota, I had a chance to visit my great-grandparents' gravestones in Minnesota. And then I went to Newry, where they were originally immigrated from, and recognized that they left because of the potato famine, and that the United States welcomed them as immigrants, as refugees, and that I think a third of the Irish population left, either because they were either famine or disease, they had to go somewhere, and Australia, New Zealand, and the United States welcomed them as being part of the Commonwealth. And I appreciate that we are a land of refugees and immigrants, and to be that welcoming place, like the Statue of Liberty.
And that is an excellent way to wrap up that portion of the interview. And then we move into the lightning round.
Okay.
So you're ready for this?
Okay, let's go.
Okay. I'm so glad you're prepared. So we are going to shift gears almost entirely.
Got it.
And we are going to kind of get into the spirit of the Halloween season.
Ooh, okay.
And our first question is always an either or.
All right.
So the first one, witches or zombies?
Witches.
Okay. I need you to qualify that answer. Why are zombies getting short shrift here?
Maybe I should choose zombies. Rising from the dead. Witches, I think, can be really positive images. We have, negative images of them, but I think of them as like the Celtic tradition, as welcoming that we are earth people. They were born of the earth, to pay attention to the seasons, to be able to look at that we can bless people or we can curse them. And I'm hoping that we will use our power to bless.
I love that positive spin on witches. I think that's fantastic. Whereas zombies, I think there's really only one way to categorize them there. So you have been to many, many places. Mm-hmm. What is one place that you have been to that you really think that most people should visit, just for the experience alone?
They should go to Istanbul.
And why?
Because it is truly a crossroads of the East and West. It is the, Byzantine Christianity, it is Muslim, it is Sufi traditions that are there. It is literally, we were taking the bridge, we're going, and in terms of traveling, but also going under like 4 bridges to be able to go to the Black Sea. We sheltered a refugee family from Ukraine, and they were from the Black Sea area, so I wanted to put my toes in the Black Sea in honor that they had come from that region, and just to be able to appreciate the incredible heritage and the priceless treasures that are there.
So the literal and metaphorical bridges.
Yes, both.
Next one. If you were a sitcom character, what would your catchphrase be?
I did think of the movie that, I can't think of his name right now, but he was like, "Catch me if you can."
Okay.
Where are you now?
Yeah, that's fantastic. Something a little Roadrunner-ish
Yes.
to it. Yeah. And then finally, your favorite Halloween candy. And this can be past or present. So if you had a childhood favorite, I'm open to that as well. Or maybe you've got something now, like maybe you're a huge fan of Sour Patch Kids.
I was going to say Snickers.
Snickers, huh?
Because one is, got that great chocolate and caramel and nuts, and who can't but smile and have a Snicker?
Again, the coming together of all these things, the nuts and the caramel and the nougat and the chocolate.
Integration.
Yes, a very kumbaya moment for candies. Well, Susie, thank you so much for coming in today and talking about this and talking about your book as well.
It's my joy and pleasure. Thank you for having me.